for many centuries. Along that coast, which holds some of the finest beaches in Africa, are predominantly Muslim Swahili cities such as Mombasa, a historic center that has contributed much to the musical and culinary heritage of the country. Inland are populous highlands famed for both their tea plantations, an economic staple during the British colonial era, and their variety of animal species, including lions, elephants, cheetahs, rhinoceroses, and hippopotamuses. Kenya's western provinces, marked by lakes and rivers, are forested, while a small portion of the north is desert and semi-desert. The country's diverse wildlife and panoramic geography draw large numbers of European and North American visitors, and tourism is an important contributor to Kenya's economy. The capital of Kenya is Nairobi, a sprawling city that, like many other African metropolises, is a study in contrast, with modern skyscrapers looking out over vast shantytowns in the distance, many harboring refugees fleeing civil wars in neighboring countries. Older neighborhoods, some of them prosperous, tend to be ethnically mixed and well served by utilities and other amenities, while the tents and hastily assembled shacks that ring the city tend to be organized tribally and even locally, inasmuch as in some instances whole rural villages have removed themselves to the more promising city. With a long history of musical and artistic expression, Kenya enjoys a rich tradition of oral and written literature, including many fables, that speak to the virtues of determination and perseverance, important and widely shared values, given the country's experience during the struggle for independence. Kenya's many peoples are well known to outsiders, largely because of the British colonial administration's openness to studying. Anthropologists and other social scientists have documented for generations the lives of the Maasai, Luhya, Luo, Kalenjin, and Kikuyu peoples, to name only some of the groups. Adding to the country's ethnic diversity are European and Asian immigrants from many nations. Kenyans proudly embrace their individual cultures and traditions, yet they are also cognizant of the importance of national solidarity. A motto of Harambee, which means in Swahili pulling together, has been stressed by Kenya's government since independence. Bisected horizontally by the equator and vertically by longitude 38 degrees E, Kenya is bordered to the north by South Sudan and Ethiopia, to the east by Somalia and the Indian Ocean, to the south by Tanzania, and to the west by Lake Victoria and Uganda. The 38th meridian divides Kenya into two halves of striking contrast. While the eastern half slopes gently to the coral-backed seashore, the western portion rises more abruptly through a series of hills and plateaus to the eastern Rift Valley, known in Kenya as the Central Rift. West of the rift is a westward sloping plateau, the lowest part of which is occupied by Lake Victoria. Within this basic framework, Kenya is divided into the following geographic regions: the Lake Victoria Basin, the Rift Valley and associated highlands, the Eastern Plateau forelands, the semi-arid and arid areas of the north and south, and the coast. The Lake Victoria Basin is part of a plateau rising eastward from the lakeshore to the Rift Highlands. The lower part, forming the lake basin proper, is itself a plateau area lying between 3,000 and 4,000 feet above sea level. The Rift Valley splits the highland region into two sections, the Mau Escarpment to the west, and the Aberta Range to the east. The Eastern Plateau forelands, located just east of the Rift Highlands, constitute a vast plateau of ancient rocks gently sloping to the coastal plain. They are a region of scattered hills and striking elevated formations, the most prominent being the hills of Taita, Kasagao, Machakos, and Kitchui. These hills, containing the area of a more favorable climate, are surrounded by regions historically prone to famine. In the Lake Victoria Basin, lava deposits have produced fertile and sandy loam soils in the plateaus north and south of Wynnum Bay, while the volcanic pile of Mount Elgin produces highly fertile volcanic soils well known for coffee and tea production. The Rift Valley and associated highlands are composed of fertile dark brown loams developed on younger volcanic deposits. The most widespread soils in Kenya, however, are the sandy soils of the semi-arid regions between the coast and the Rift Highlands. To the north of the rift are vast areas covered by red desert soils, mainly sandy loams. Kenya's soils are subject to widespread erosion, largely because of the lack of forest cover. Overgrazing and cultivation, especially in the arid and semi-arid regions, also contribute to soil loss. Seasonal climatic changes are controlled by the large-scale pressure systems of the western Indian Ocean and adjacent landmasses. From December to March, northeast winds predominate north of the equator, while south to southeast winds dominate south of it. These months are fairly dry, although rain may occur locally. The rainy season extends from late March to May, with air flowing from the east in both hemispheres. From June to August there is little precipitation, and southwest winds prevail north of the equator as southeast winds prevail in the south. In most parts of the coast, average temperatures exceed 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 27 degrees centigrade, and relative humidity is high year-round. From the humid coast, where annual precipitation is between 30 and 50 inches, 760 and 1,270 millimeters, precipitation decreases westward to about 20 inches, 500 millimeters, per year. Only on the southern coast is precipitation reliable enough for prosperous agriculture. In the highlands between elevations of 7,000 and 9,000 feet, the characteristic landscape consists of patches of evergreen forest separated by wide expanses of short grass. Where the forest has survived human encroachment, it includes economically valuable trees such as cedar, Juniper spicera, and varieties of podo. Above the forest, a zone of bamboo extends to about 10,000 feet, beyond which there is mountain moorland bearing tree heaths, tree groundsel, a foundation timber of the genus Senecio, and giant lobelia, a widely distributed herbaceous plant. East and west of the highlands, forests give way to low trees scattered through an even cover of short grass. The Swahili language is mostly the products of marriages between Arabs and Africans live along the coast. Arabs introduced Islam into Kenya when they entered the area from the Arabian Peninsula about the 8th century AD. Although a wide variety of languages are spoken in Kenya, the lingua franca is Swahili. This multi-purpose language, which evolved along the coast from elements of local Bantu languages, Arabic, Persian, Portuguese, Hindi, and English, is the language of local trade, and is also used along with English as an official language in the Kenyan legislative body, the National Assembly, and the courts. Freedom of religion is guaranteed by the Constitution. More than 4/5 of the people are Christian, primarily attending Protestant or Roman Catholic churches. Christianity first came to Kenya in the 15th century through the Portuguese, but this contact ended in the 17th century. Christianity was revived at the end of the 19th century and expanded rapidly. African traditional religions have a concept of a supreme being who is known by various names. Many syncretic faiths have arisen in which the adherents borrow from Christian traditions and African religious practices. Independent churches are numerous. One such church, the Maria Legio of Africa, is dominated by the Luo people. Muslims constitute a sizable minority and include both Sunnis and SH+sites. There are also small populations of Jews, Jains, Sikhs, and Baha 3/4. In remote areas, Christian mission stations offer educational and medical facilities as well as religious ones. Most of Kenya's population is rural and lives in scattered settlements, the location and concentration of which depend largely on climatic and soil conditions. Before European colonization, virtually no villages or towns existed except along the coast, while urbanization was confined to fishing villages, Arab trading ports, and towns visited by those from the Arabian Peninsula and Asia. The modern cities of Mombasa, Lamu, and Malindi were among the pre-existing urban areas that were expanded during the colonial period. Nairobi, originally a Maasai watering hole, became important because of its connection to the railroad, which came through the area at the beginning of the 20th century. Other towns, such as Eldoret, Embu, Kisumu, and Nakuru, were established by Europeans as administrative centers, mission stations, and markets. The migration from rural to urban areas has accelerated since independence, spurred by greater economic development in urban areas. In the late 1960s, about 1/10 of the national population lived in urban areas of 1,000 or more people. By the turn of the 21st century, the figure had more than doubled. The largest coastal city is Mombasa, while the majority of Kenyans in the interior live in the capital city, Nairobi. The influx of people has placed a major burden on the provision of such services as education, health, and sanitation, water, and electricity. Since independence was achieved in 1963, Kenya's economy has contained both privately owned and state-run enterprises. Most of the country's business is in private hands, with a large amount of foreign investment, but the government also shapes the country's economic development through various regulatory powers and parastatals, or enterprises that it partly or wholly owns. The aim of this policy is to achieve economic growth and stability, generate employment, and maximize foreign earnings by achieving high levels of agricultural exports, while substituting domestically produced goods for those that have been imported. For a decade after independence, this policy showed great promise as rising wages, employment, and government revenue provided the means for expanding health services, education, transportation, and communication. But problems that arose with the rise of global oil prices in 1973 have been aggravated by periodic drought and accelerating population growth, and Kenya's economy has been unable to maintain a favorable balance of trade, while addressing the problems of chronic poverty and growing unemployment. In an effort to decrease its dependence on volatile agricultural markets, Kenya attempted to diversify its exports in the last decade of the 20th century, adding horticultural products, clothing, cement, soda ash, and fluorspar. The country also made the export of manufactured goods such as paper and vehicles a priority. Domestic restrictions on imports have been removed slowly, however, and this policy has been only partially successful. Kenya's economy, which did not grow at a constant rate during the last 2 decades of the 20th century, continued to be dominated by the external market. Tourism and agricultural exports were still the major source of foreign exchange for the country in the early 21st century. Agriculture plays an important role in Kenya's economy. Although its share of the gross domestic product has declined from more than 2/5 in 1964 to less than 1/5 in the early 21st century, agriculture supplies the manufacturing sector with raw materials and generates tax revenue and foreign exchange that support the rest of the economy. Moreover, it employs the majority of the population. In the first years after independence, the government sought to redistribute the land on which most of the agricultural exports were produced. Although there are now thousands of large farms, ranches, and plantations, the majority of the farms are smaller than 5 acres, 2 hectares. Tea and fresh flowers are the key foreign exchange earners. Sisal, cotton, and fruits and vegetables also are important cash crops. Coffee, historically an important foreign exchange earner, still contributes to the economy, but began declining in importance and earnings in the 1990s, owing in part to market instability and deregulation. Kenya supplies the majority of the pyrethrum, a flour used to create the non-synthetic pesticide pyrethrin, to the world market. Demand for this product fluctuates depending upon the level of interest in the United States, which is the largest consumer of this commodity. National boards that control key export crops such as coffee, tea, and cotton were deregulated beginning in the early 1990s. The major crops for domestic consumption are corn and wheat. Sugarcane was an export crop in the 1970s and 80s, but by the 90s domestic demand exceeded the supply, and it had to be imported. Livestock, including cattle and goats, is raised and dairy goods are produced primarily for domestic use, and the government maintains a reserve supply of such commodities as skim milk powder, cheese, and butter. Surplus animal and dairy products are exported. Despite the importance of agriculture to the economic well-being of the country, the lack of water, infrastructure, and arable land, less than 1/10 of Kenya can be used for agriculture, seriously constrain further expansion. Fish and marine products represent a small but growing portion of Kenya's economy and are locally important. Freshwater fish from Lakes Victoria and Rudolph constitute the bulk of the catch. Soda ash, used in glassmaking, is Kenya's most valuable mineral export and is quarried at Lake Magadi in the Rift Valley. Limestone deposits at the coast and in the interior are exploited for cement manufacture and agriculture. Vermiculite, gold, rubies, topazes, and salt are also important, as is fluorite, also known as fluorspar, and used in metallurgy, which is mined along the Kerio River in the north. Deposits of titanium and zirconium-bearing sands were found in multiple locations northeast of Mombasa and to the south of the city. Exploration for petroleum has, so far, met with limited success. Kenya's economic development has been tied to its ability to improve energy resources. The emphasis since independence has been on producing hydroelectricity, but access to energy is limited in rural areas since the bulk of electricity is consumed by the 2 major urban centers of Nairobi and Mombasa. There are hydroelectric plants located on the Tana and Turkwel rivers. Geothermal resources in the Rift Valley have been tapped since the early 1980s to generate electricity and have come to supply a significant amount of Nairobi's total needs. Kenya is the most industrially developed country in East Africa, but it has not yet produced results to match its potential. Manufacturing is based largely on processing imported goods, although the government supports the development of export-oriented industries. Major industries include agricultural processing, publishing and printing, and the manufacture of textiles and clothing, cement, tires, batteries, paper, ceramics, and leather goods. Assembly plants, which utilize imported parts, produce various kinds of commercial and passenger vehicles, and even export a small quantity to other African countries such as Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. Steel processing for re-export and for the construction industry is a growing sector, with about a dozen steel mills in operation. The petroleum industry, which was deregulated in 1994, produces diesel and jet fuel from imported crude oil at a refinery near Mombasa and provides a major source of foreign exchange. The state-run Central Bank of Kenya, established by legislation in 1966, regulates the money supply. The monetary unit is the Kenyan shilling, assists in the development of the monetary, credit, and banking system, acts as banker and financial advisor to the government, and grants short-term or seasonal loans. There also are a large number of commercial, merchant, and foreign banks in Kenya. The Nairobi Stock Exchange, founded in 1954, is one of the largest in sub-Saharan Africa. Agricultural products such as tea, fresh flowers, fruits and vegetables, and coffee constitute the greatest proportion of Kenya's exports. The remainder of the exports consists of petroleum products, cement, hides and skins, and soda ash. Imports include machinery and transport equipment, chemical products, petroleum and petroleum products, and food and beverages. Among Kenya's chief trading partners are India, China, Uganda, and Tanzania. Kenya is a member of the East African Community Customs Union. Kenya is home to some of the rarest and most interesting species of wildlife in the world. Because of this, tourism is one of the country's major sources of foreign exchange, with visitors coming largely from countries of the European Union. Tourism revolves around a basic framework of national parks, game reserves, and game sanctuaries, where a wide variety of animals and cultural attractions can be enjoyed. The transportation infrastructure that developed both before and after independence allowed Kenya to emerge as a viable state. Roads became the major link between the urban areas and the rural hinterlands, although they were developed in colonial times as a subsidiary of the railway line running from Mombasa to the western parts of the country. Railways, the second most important mode of transport after roads, are operated by Kenya Railways. The main line runs northwest from Mombasa through Nairobi, Nakuru, and Eldoret to the Ugandan border. Major branch lines run from Nakuru to Kisumu on Lake Victoria, and from Nairobi to Nanyuki near Mount Kenya, and another goes into Tanzania. Privatization of Kenya Railways began early in the 21st century, and efforts were undertaken to make the railways more competitive in the freight market. Passenger service constitutes a very small share of the railway business. The strategic location of Kenya on the western shores of the Indian Ocean, with easy connections to different parts of Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, has greatly enhanced the role of the international airports at Nairobi and Mombasa. Kenya has a very large airport known as Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, which serves both regional and intentional flights. It has upgraded its airport services and passenger as well as cargo handling capacities in recent times, in order to meet the ever-growing demand for better service and a large volume of imports and exports of materials globally. Mombasa, the country's principal port, handles the bulk of the import and export traffic, not only of Kenya but of Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, and the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The ports of Lamu and Malindi serve mainly the coastal trade and fisheries. Telephone service has greatly expanded since the early 1980s, but, while the number of telephones more than doubled between 1984 and 1995, the great majority of the population still does not have access to local telephone lines. Cellular telephone service experienced rapid growth around the turn of the century, as did internet access. By the mid-2000s, the country had one of the highest numbers of internet users in sub-Saharan Africa. Like other industries in Kenya, telecommunications were being privatized at the start of the 21st century. At this time, Kenya leads in telecommunication technologies, especially with the invention of the mobile money system in the region of East Africa. Finally, time and space will be short to accommodate all of Kenya's development sectors. This is a piece of information to viewers about magical Kenya. Discover yourself to Kenya's natural beauty in the future.